Welcome to Beyond Names. I'm Dr. Habib. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine God, Yahweh, Allah, Elohim, Brahman, Great Spirit, Higher Power, you are welcome here, including if you're still searching for language that fits. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that each of us carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with introduction of our conversation partner for this episode, Pat Aylward. Abdullah Pat Aylward currently serves as the board chair of the Shadhiliyya Sufi Communities and has been doing so since 2023. Abdullah Pat is a Muqaddam Murabi Ruhi and founding leader of the Sufi Center Minnesota community. He was a board member of the Project for Pride in Living from 1985 to 2010 and served as its chair from 2001 to 2007. Project for Pride in Living is a large Minnesota nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide housing, job training, and education for people who are poor and or of moderate income. Pat has been a board member and an officer of a number of nonprofits. To learn more about Pat and his work, please visit suficentermn.org. Pat, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Habib. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So, you've been forewarned, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself by sharing your spiritual story.
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. My spiritual journey is a bit of a long one. Um, I grew up in a Catholic family, five kids. So, and as a kid, as a child, I had an interest in the religion. I was an altar boy. Um, I wanted to be a priest when I was in the fifth grade. Lost that one
Awesome.
within a year or so. Um, but I've always had a yearning for spiritual understanding, even from that age. As I got into high school, my interests turned more towards social justice, both what was happening within our local community and what was happening in the greater world around me. And the spiritual quest was always something that was an integral part of my
Hmm.
life, such that when I was 16, so when I was a junior in high school, a couple of friends of mine came to me and said, there's this guy teaching these classes on like yoga or meditation or something, and we want to go and listen to him. So why don't you come with us? And so I did. I went with them, and the guy teaching was Dr. Ushubud Arya, who was at the time a professor at the University of Minnesota, who taught Asian religions and Sanskrit.
Hmm.
And as the word pundit implies, he was a scholar, but he wasn't an ordinary pundit. He had grown up in India in a Sanskrit speaking family,
Wow.
speaking Sanskrit as their primary language. Now,
Wow.
many people think that Sanskrit is a dead language, and he would remark on this to us on occasion, and he would say, "No, in India, a country of at that time, I don't know, 700 million, however many people it was, he would tell us there are 2,000 families in India that keep Sanskrit as their primary language."
Wow.
And so he was an extraordinary scholar. So he was teaching these classes in his house near the university up in his attic. And the classes were attended by kids that were either his students or friend of his students. So they were all in their early 20s. They were college kids. And the three of us, high school kids. So he was teaching Vedanta, pure Vedanta. And for those in the audience who may not be aware, Vedanta is like classical Indian meaning South Asian philosophy. It's a complete structure of philosophy and religion and living. So he was teaching this using Sanskrit language a lot, and I understood maybe 5% of what he was saying.
Mm,
But I was struck by his presence and
mm,
who he was.
mm.
And I said to myself, I barely understand anything that he's saying, but there's something that he has that I need to find out about. My friends, on the other hand, were like, this is really boring. We're out of here. So they never went back, but I did. I kept going back and I kept studying with him. And this was during the summer. So this was between my junior and senior year in high school. And at the end of that course, they did a retreat at a state park in Minnesota where everyone, camped at the state park. And I had to get permission from my parents to do this.
Cool.
And so, we would set up tents in the state park, and in the morning we would go down to the river, the St. Croix River, and people that wanted to would swim in the river. Then we'd come up on the banks of the St. Croix and do yoga, practice yoga. And then he would teach in the mornings and in the afternoons. And it was like being immersed in this other world. And during the course of that week, there was a couple that got married. And so they created these garlands of flowers and a fire pit. And they had a traditional Vedanta wedding, cooked all kinds of great vegetarian food. And there was music going into the night. And for a 16-year-old, this was quite something, man. And at the end of that weekend, I got initiated by him. And my mom went with me to the initiation, you know, and you bring presents to the teacher. And I think I brought like an orange and a case of Memorex tapes because my dad was a manufacturer's representative for electronics instruments, and one of his lines was Memorex. And Dr. Arya used to tape every lecture that he gave. And
Oh.
he loved that. He loved that tape, that box of Memorex tapes. He would refer to that for years when I was in the audience and he would see me. And Pat and his mom brought me Memorex tapes.
Oh my goodness.
So that he was my first spiritual teacher. He was
Wow.
my first spiritual teacher. I started studying with him. His guru was Swami Rama. And so
Oh,
I met his guru sometime later, Swami Rama, and I was part of that community in my late teens and early 20s.
oh.
And I then went from high school into college, and I said that I was very interested in social justice, which I was and am. And so I went in as a political science major.
Hmm.
And in my first semester at Macalester College in St. Paul, I met another extraordinary person who was a teacher in the South Asian Studies department, David White. And I took a seminar from him on Gandhi.
Hmm.
And David White was, again, David White had done his dissertation, his PhD dissertation on Ramana Maharshi. He
Hmm.
introduced me to Ramana Maharshi. And for those, again, for those who may not be aware, Ramana Maharshi was one of the greatest saints of the 20th century from India, a human being of just legendary and extraordinary presence and being. So David had done his dissertation on Ramana Maharshi, and he was a conscientious objector during World War II, spent
Hmm.
time in a federal prison because of that.
Wow.
When he got out, he was later personally initiated by Paramahansa Yogananda, personally initiated by Yogananda, and
Wow.
started practicing that type of meditation with Yogananda.
Wow.
David's lifelong pursuit of understanding was the Bhagavad Gita.
Hmm.
He was a scholar and student of the Gita and was working on his own translation. And by the time that when I was a student with him, he had maybe 6 or 7 chapters of the Gita translated, and we would use his translations in our studies. But he would sit up on his desk. He was pretty much completely bald, kind of a Yoda-looking figure in a lot of ways, with a thermos of hot tea, and he would teach us about Asian philosophy and Asian religions. And he embodied the Gita, the yoga of action, the yoga of work. And I learned so much from him. So he set me on the path of exploring Asian philosophy and Asian religions, Hinduism, Buddhism,
Mm.
Taoism, Zen. And so I started studying all of these things, kind of neglected my political science studies, and started moving in that direction of philosophy and religion.
Yeah.
And over the course of the ensuing years in my early 20s, I actually returned to Christianity for a while. I
Mm.
started studying Christianity from a scholarly standpoint and also from a mystical standpoint, especially the Eastern Orthodox tradition and what they call the practice of the Jesus prayer.
Mhm.
That's a practice that's used in Eastern Orthodoxy, and I started practicing that. And it's kind of like a mantra. There are long and short versions of it. The longest version is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And the shortened version would be something like, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. So in a way, it's kind of a Christian Tauba practice. And so I did that. I
Mm.
practiced that and did fasting. My longest water fast was like 40 days.
Mm.
And read, the Bible, the New Testament, and Christian literature, mostly the writings of the saints and the
Mm.
sages of Christianity. And
Mhm.
so I dove deep into mystical Christianity in my early 20s. And I always had a thirst for understanding, and so I read Ram Dass, I read Ramana Maharshi, I read Alan Watts, I read Jiddu Krishnamurti. I was so taken by Krishnamurti and the writings of Krishnamurti in my mid-20s that I actually traveled in one case to Ojai, California, in another case to San Francisco to be with Krishnamurti and to receive the teachings, from him directly. And so all of those were huge influences on me. Minnesota happens to be a community where there is a significant Tibetan population.
Mm.
And in my work as a real estate agent here in the Twin Cities, I came across Tibetans who became clients of mine and introduced me to the aspect of Tibetan Buddhism. And so I started studying Tibetan Buddhism with some of the Rinpoches who were here in Minnesota,
Wow.
and was fortunate to have seen the Dalai Lama when he came to Minnesota one of those years. And so I moved into Tibetan Buddhism for a while. And after that, I kind of slid into Zen and started practicing Zen Buddhism. So a lot of different things, a lot of different. In fact, a friend of mine, a colleague in the real estate world, we were at a
Uh,
party one night, and he says to me, he goes, "Are you going to try every religion that there is?" Because he saw me go from this to this to this.
Yeah, yeah.
So how I came to the Sufi path, when I was in college, I did study Islam because I studied everything.
Mm.
And I read the writings of Pir Vilayat Khan. And
Mm.
so I had a little bit of an understanding of Sufism. And I was introduced to Rumi, the poet, Rumi,
Yeah,
again when I was in high school.
yeah.
And again, some friends of mine invited me to a poetry reading. I had never been to a poetry reading before. And so we went to the downtown Minneapolis Public Library for a poetry reading.
Yeah.
And the poet was Robert Bly.
Mm.
Robert Bly was one of the preeminent poets in the United States in the 20th century. And he was reading the poetry of Rumi, Mirabai, and Kabir. And with him, he had two people who eventually became friends of mine. One was a sitar player, and the other
Mm.
was a tabla player.
Mm.
And so while they were playing, he was reciting this ecstatic poetry. And
Mm.
I had never heard poetry until that day like that. And
Mm,
that opened up the world of Rumi for me at that time. And I fell in love with Rumi, which I still am to this day, you know?
mm, yeah.
So we find ourselves in the year 2000 or so. I have been divorced for a couple of years, and a good friend of mine had set me up with her friend in Chicago.
Okay.
And so I talked to Carla a few times on the phone, flew down to Chicago. This was pre-internet, so I had never seen a picture of her, just flew down to the city and
Yeah.
we went out, had dinner, went out on the town, had a great time, and didn't become, it wasn't a relationship for us, but we become very fast friends, which we are to this day. She's one of my closest friends.
Mm,
So about a year and a half after our date, she called me up and she said, there's this man coming to Chicago. You have to come and see him. His
mm,
name is Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe, and you need to come. You need to do this. I had no idea who he was. I knew she told me he was a Sufi teacher, and I knew a little bit about Sufism. But I said, okay, if you say I need to come, I'll come. So I did. I flew down to Chicago, and Ibrahim, Dr. Jaffe, was doing a workshop with his then wife, Nada, and it was on relationships. And I
mm,
wasn't in a relationship at the time. So Dr. Jaffe is up on the stage, and he's a healer. And he's doing his healing thing, and he's bringing people up to the stage and doing demonstrations with them. And people are laughing and they're crying and they're having all kinds of experiences at all ends of the spectrum.
yeah.
And I, who had been used to meditation and various systems of meditation, had never
Mm.
been exposed to healing or spiritual healing at all. So this was completely new to me. And I'm thinking to myself, this is kind of weird. He's up there in his robes and his hat and he's doing all these things. And I sat there in the middle of the audience, kind of scrunched down and just said, I hope to God he doesn't pick on me and bring me. But again, just as I had with my first spiritual teacher, Dr. Arya,
Mm,
I was struck by his presence.
mm,
And he communicated to me, he gave to me a presence of acceptance
mm,
and unconditional love and like arms wide open.
mm,
And I said to myself, whatever it is that he's got, that's what I want. That's what I've been looking for. That's it. What he has is what I want.
yeah.
And I didn't say a word to him that weekend. And I just started traveling to various cities where he was teaching so I could take things with him.
Mm,
And 2 months later, I found myself in what he calls a personal retreat intensive, which is 4 days with 9 other people. And so I'm there for a 4 day intensive with him, having met him 2 months prior. Everybody else in that workshop was either a graduate of his university, a current student in his university, or they've been on the path for a very long time, and me. But I knew that it was it. I just knew it. I knew it intuitively. And so
mm,
I just jumped in and I didn't question myself. I just
yeah.
kept saying yes. And shortly after that, I met his teacher, Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, I entered the university, what is now the University of Sufism.
Yeah.
So I met Sidi Muhammad at a home in Chicago. Back in the days, he would tour the United States, and a lot of his teachings would be done in people's homes.
Yeah.
And so I went back to Chicago. My friend Carla took me to the house to be with all the other people that were there and Sidi. And Sidi was teaching in front of the fireplace. And at one point, when he paused, there was a break. He started walking towards the kitchen. Carla grabs me by the hand, and she says, "Come, come. I want to introduce you to Sidi." So she takes me up to Sidi and she goes, "Sidi, this is Pat." Sidi's walking towards the kitchen. He stops, he turns around and looks at me, and he says, "I've been waiting for you for a very long time." Then he turns back and heads to the kitchen. And that was my introduction to Sidi.
Oh my goodness.
So I just started attending the university, and the university at that time was consisted of a lot of people that were entering from the healing professions. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that were therapists or that practiced traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncturists, a lot of people from the healing professions. I'm a real estate agent. So, and what I described as far as Ibrahim doing his Ibrahim thing and the healing and the demonstrations, that was what school was like, only more intense.
Yeah.
And I sat in the back and I just watched, and it was like, wow, man. I mean, there was so much that was going on, and I just kind of absorbed it. I said hardly anything to
Yeah.
anybody, and
Yeah.
I just kind of absorbed it.
Yeah.
And over the course of weeks and months and years, I started changing. Now, at the time, I would not have been able to see it, but looking back, I could clearly see it, you know. Um, one of the one of the there were many stories from that era, but one that I like to tell when I'm teaching is that a lot of the people coming from those healing professions had very developed intuitive gifts,
Mm.
and they were sensitive to what was happening with somebody on a non-physical level. Me, not so much. And Dr. Jaffe is very visual in his subtle perception.
Yes.
So when you speak to him, he'll say, "This is what I'm seeing. It's right here. It looks like this," and he'll describe things in visual terms.
Yeah.
And one day, this was in my third year, so my last year, he's going to do a healing demonstration. And usually, when he would ask for volunteers, all the people would raise their hands, pick me, pick me, pick me, and I would never raise my hand. This time, he looks over the raised hands and he goes, "Abdullah, why don't you come up?" So when Ibrahim says come up, you come up. So I went up to the head of the class. I forget what it was that we were working on. He had me facing the class and he says, "Okay, Abdullah, look at this, this, and this." So I close my eyes and like uh blank screen, nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm going, okay, here I am up in front of the class. He's saying, "Tell me what you see. What am I going to do?" And so in that moment of panic, the only thing that I could think of to do was to scan myself, like what was happening in my body at that time, and to describe what I was feeling.
Mm.
So that's what I did.
Yeah.
I just discerned whatever was happening with me at that moment, and I described the feeling to him. And
Mm.
he said, "Yeah, that's it."
Mm.
Which was a huge moment for me because I had translated what he was saying to me into my language, which was kinesthetic and not visual, and gave him the answer that way. And he said yes. And it gave me to understand that there are different ways of seeing, quote unquote, seeing things.
Right.
That was
Right.
huge for me. And so that was a big learning for me to know that there's different ways of doing things, and I need to be comfortable with what my way is,
Yeah.
and define what my is. So as I was going to the school program, at that time it was for 1 week, and we would travel to a location in California, and we'd be immersed in this setting with all our fellow students and teachers, and we were like in a bubble of love, actually.
Mm.
And it was an extraordinary opportunity to really look at what's going on within your life and to move in directions that are, the directions that I wanted to move in, that we wanted to move in.
Mm.
And as I came out of the school setting and went back into my life in the world, it was in the beginning, it was really hard because I
Mm.
was going from a situation in which everybody was in a similar kind of state and vibration and intention, and going back into what the world is, what we all know
Yeah.
the world is.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it would take me anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to transition,
Mm.
where I
Mm.
actually felt comfortable back in the world.
Mm.
And that comfortableness within the world was me more like being in the world and not quite being in that place that I had been at the school.
Mhm.
And over the course of those 3 years, that transition from being in that environment of love and compassion and acceptance to being in the world got less and less, to the point where I could walk from this world into that world and it was seamless.
Mm,
And that has proven to be my experience, increasingly so ever since.
mm,
So that whereas in the beginning there was my Sufi world and my other world, my family, my work, whatever that might be. Now
mhm,
there's only one world for me. They're not two worlds. They're only one world now. But it took a long time for me to integrate that within myself, to be comfortable within myself as to where I was, what I knew, what I didn't know, all of those different things, you know. But that's true for me now. Um, and this work with the Sufi community
mhm,
and this community has, in ways both big and small, saved my life on any number of occasions.
mm,
And you know, I still work as a real estate agent, and I have my work in the Sufi world, and my work in the Sufi world is as important, if not more important, to
mm,
me now, because, what I do, with the teaching and the work that I do with the organizations is me giving back in acknowledgement of every gift I've received, which are of such a nature that I could never begin to repay them.
mm,
But that's the motivation for me doing what I do these days.
mm, mm.
That was a long answer to a short question.
It was the perfectly answer to that story. Yeah, I've heard that for many listeners, the part where people share their spiritual stories is their favorite part of the podcast. So
Uh,
yeah, I think it's great to hear how we get to where we are. And it's always fun for me when I hear little pieces and I'm like, oh, no way, I can really relate to that. Like about the same time that I came to Sufism, I was also going through yoga teacher training. So I was reading Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal's books at the same time as I was reading the Bhagavad Gita.
yeah,
And I'd be like, oh, that sounds so much like that. And that
yeah,
sounds so much like that.
yeah,
And then I would find that really enlivening to find these commonalities between these two different systems that I was studying at the same time. And I have remained that way, where I'm enlivened by finding the commonalities between.
same. I'm the
Yeah.
same way. I mean, I really like teaching to brand new people, people who have had no exposure to this. One of the
Mm.
reasons I enjoy it so much is that, as my friend said, I've either studied or practiced a lot of the religions out there. And so no matter what somebody comes to me with, whatever their background is, I can relate to it in a lot of
Yeah,
ways. And so I really enjoy that a lot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I also really appreciate um, I'm going to use the word sincerity. I hope that that's okay, but the idea that you were searching from such a young age, I I really turned away from anything to do with religion or spirituality and came to it much later. And then when I did come to it, I came to it skeptically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not the same as your experience of sitting in the workshop and going, "Oh, this is kind of strange, this is a little weird." But it was kind of like, okay, I'm just sitting back and going, "Huh. Well, I'm going to try this, but I'm going to look at it like a science experiment. I'm just
Yeah.
going to like do this thing, do this
Yeah.
practice, see what happens."
Yeah.
And it was years before I took the promise to be a part of the Sufi order. Yeah. So there are different aspects of your story that I can be like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. The seeing part, when you talked
Yeah.
about Ibrahim Jaffe and seeing, and yeah, I was one of those who's like, yeah, no, I don't see anything. Yeah. Nope, not a thing. I'm feeling some things, but I'm
Yeah.
not seeing. I'm not
Yeah.
seeing anything.
Yeah.
And then I kept praying about which major to be in, and of course, my guidance was to be in the healing major, which is the one that I absolutely did not want to have anything to do with. Oh, God knows what's best for us, and we don't,
That's right.
right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, there's obviously parts of your story that I especially appreciate because I can relate to them closely. I want to follow up on a couple of things, but one of the things is you mentioned this seamless transition, and I remember what it was like for me to be in school. And at the time, I worked for uh, the state government, and I was managing special projects. And I don't know that I had a really difficult time with the transition, but I do know that that what I quickly used to help with that was like, okay, this is practice field. This is my, so if I was in a meeting and the stakeholders were particularly contentious, I looked at it as an opportunity to practice what I had been practicing at the University of Sufism. And I found that it was amazingly effective.
Yeah.
That suddenly meetings went so much better than they did before.
Yeah.
Suddenly people started being much more polite to each other when I was just holding the pull of this is the standard. In order for you to participate in this meeting, this is how we're going to interact with each other. And it worked.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you had any advice around that getting to that place of seamlessness where you bring together this inner experience that is so impactful, that is this experience of unconditional love, and this experience of acceptance, this experience of this embrace, and then in the world,
Yeah.
doing business in the world,
Yeah.
interacting with a business transaction and so on and so forth. You get the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I do. Um, there's a lot of different ways to approach that,
Yeah.
but I'll talk a little bit more about um, how it developed for me. And for me, integral to being at this point now was I needed to be stripped of my images and conceptions of myself,
Mm,
of who I thought I was.
yeah.
And how it happened for me was through an extraordinarily difficult and hard time in my life,
Mm,
um, which was some years back. This was after I had met Ibrahim, after I'd gone through the university
hmm
and was going through a divorce. Um, really challenging relationship on the one hand. And I don't want to lose the gifts of that relationship. So remind me if I don't refer to them because I do want to refer to them. But at the time, it was really hard. So I was like the person that had kind of like founded the Minnesota community. And shortly after I started doing things, a couple good friends of mine, Phil and Kay Sorensen, came into the community. We had known each other for a very long time. And, at that point, it was the three of us. And so we would have teachers come in and we would be doing workshops on a constant basis.
hmm
And during this time, when things were going really bad in my marriage, we had a very senior teacher come into town and do a weekend workshop with us. And I and my then wife would have private meetings with all the teachers that came in. We talk about our relationship and what we could do. And so that was kind of a something that we would do. And so we did with this particular teacher on Saturday night before the Sunday teaching. And she said to me, Abdullah, I think for you, you need to be completely transparent and honest in front of the community. I'd like to do that with you tomorrow. Are you willing to do that? And I was again at a stage in my life where I said yes to everything. So I said yes. So the next day, Sunday, she was getting people's feedbacks from what had happened the day before, and she came to me last. She goes, Abdullah, would you come up here? I said, sure. So I'm up there in front of, now this is my community.
Hmm.
And she goes, tell them what's happening with you. Now,
Hmm.
I had been a person that on the outside, if you looked at me from the outside, everything was fine. Everything was good. I was a
Yeah.
leader of the community. Everybody related to me that way. She
Yeah.
says, tell them what's going on with you. So I told about the problems I was having in my marriage. This was right around the economic crash of 2008. My business sucked.
Hmm.
Um, Everything was going bad. So
Yeah.
I started describing this. She goes, tell them in more detail. So I did. And by the end of that, she had various people come out and act voices of me. This person was my voice of God. This person was the voice of my ego. This person was, da da da.
Oh,
By
yeah.
and by the end of that, I was like on the floor, kind of like, in a fetal position, and just a puddle of water.
Yeah.
And and my wife hadn't come to that session, so she didn't see any of this. I go home and I'm just like afraid. And she sees me having no idea what had happened. And she goes, oh, he's in really bad shape. I went to the bedroom, crawled into the bed, pulled the covers over my head. She, unbeknownst to me, called my psychologist brother and said, Pat's in a really bad place. You need to come over here with your father. And, he needs either help or commitment or something right now.
Wow.
So they drove over to the house. And my sister alerted me to the fact that they were coming. And in my internal state of like shaking and not knowing what's going on, my dad and my brother are trying to convince me to go down to the Hennepin County Medical Center and check myself in.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm trying to convince them that I'm planning to go out to this retreat center in California with Dr. Jaffe and Dr. Laird, who are, physicians that are friends of mine, and they're going to take care of me. And they go, oh, it's too far. We need and blah 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 blah. Until I finally was able to convince them to let me
Oh,
leave me alone.
yeah.
And so a couple weeks later, that's exactly what I did. I went out to the retreat center in California with my life completely falling around me.
Yeah.
And for the weeks and months that followed, I mean, I was completely broken.
Yeah.
On the outwardly world plane, I was broken. My business sucked. I didn't have any money. My marriage was ending. And I could no longer keep up any facade about being this kind of spiritual teacher because
Hmm.
it was evident to everyone that
Yeah.
I was, a broken man at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
And I was. And this Sufi community saved my life. They raised money for me when
Hmm.
my biological family said, I went to one of my brothers and I said, can you loan me a couple thousand? He goes, man, I'd like to, but my wife says no, can't do it. But
Hmm.
my Sufi family absolutely did.
Wow.
And I didn't teach for quite a while because I didn't know who I was at that point.
Hmm.
And we had a number of Indonesian families in our community, and they brought me in, and I would resume teaching in the basement of one of their homes. And it was like five or six of them. And I would teach from Music of the Soul. And they just were my friends and they just embraced me.
Hmm.
But as I reemerged back into the community, I was different. I wasn't the same person that I had been. I was broken. But Sidi, our teacher, talks about breaking your tomb. He describes this as being something that is necessary for a human being to do. And
Hmm.
when I read those words the first time, I didn't really understand what breaking your tomb meant. But as I was experiencing those things that I was experiencing, I understand very well what breaking your tomb means.
Yeah.
And for me, Habib, I had to go through that. I had to come to a place where my image of who I thought I was or who I wanted other people to see me as had to be let go of and had to be broken and had to be discarded entirely. And
Yeah.
it took that for it to happen to me. And
Mm,
as it did happen to me, I became a different type of teacher. I
mm,
became a different type of human being.
yeah.
And it became clearer and clearer to me that my values in this world are creating a life of love and compassion and kindness and inclusion and respect for everyone that I encounter.
Mm,
And what I accomplish in my outer world and the money and the awards and the tributes are fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're just things. They
yeah.
aren't the core of who I am. And I'm really, really clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing with such honesty.
You're welcome.
Now, again, there's a lot I can relate to. I can relate to that sense of just being crushed and trying to just put the pieces back together and hang on um, and also that getting to that point where you have to face that all the ideas of yourself that you have about who you are, that you just coming to that point where you can't not face that
Yeah,
the time has come
yeah.
that you have to let those go. When I was in that space, um, I was at the land at the Sufi Center in uh, Pope Valley at the time, Pope Valley, California at the time. And I would just sit in retreat, in isolation, and do the recitation of La ilaha illallah. There is no God, little g, but God, big G, for the listeners who may not know. O Malik al Haq al Mubin, the clear manifest truth. And so I just sat and did that recitation again, over and over and over, just like surrendering all the stuff that I thought about myself, all the images of myself, who I thought I was, who I thought I'd been for a very long time. So, um, did you have any particular practices that were a part of that transition, that process for you?
I mean everything.
Everything.
Um, but let me, I don't want to lose sight of the one of the gifts.
Yeah,
So, the marriage itself was really tough, really hard.
yeah.
And she has two girls. And when I first met them, when I first met Izzy and Zoe, they were maybe like 6 and 8 years old.
Mhm.
And when we first got married and I moved into her house, the youngest one was like not happy
Mm,
because it had been the nice triad of the three of them, and now there was this guy,
yeah,
in the house. She
yeah.
was not happy with me. By the end, when I was trying to convince my dad and my brother not to lock me up, she was my greatest fan, and
Mm,
and and she was just so she didn't want to see me go, and so we did get divorced. And my ex-wife has a lot of good qualities, and one of her good qualities is that she doesn't hold grudges.
mm,
And so we were divorced. She found herself as a single mom of two young girls.
yeah,
And that's tough. That's a hard life.
yeah, yeah.
And so I was worried that she would cut me out of the girls' lives. Not
Yeah.
only did she not do that, but um, they needed, rides to friend's house, pick up from school, help with their homework. And so she would ask me to take them here and there. And I always said yes. I never said no. I never said no. I
Yeah,
always said yes so that I could spend time with the girls.
yeah,
And to this day, we're family. They're
mm,
members of my family. They're my kids and
yeah,
grandkids, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And those little girls, especially Zoe, the young one,
yeah.
taught me about love.
Mm.
Zoe would, I mean, she didn't like it when I first moved in, but by the end, and Zoe is just, she has the biggest heart of anybody in the world. And she goes, love you, love you, love you. And as a man, I always found those words, I love you, difficult,
Yeah.
challenging, you know?
Yeah.
And Zoe was the one that really taught me because she would end every conversation with "I love you." Now, a lot of times it's just okay, goodbye. Instead of goodbye, it's love you. And so a lot of times it is just that, but it's more than that, you know,
Yeah.
because if you end every conversation that way, there's a way in which you know it's true. She
Yeah.
does love me, you
Oh.
know? And she taught me that. That little girl
Yeah.
taught me that. She
Yeah.
was one of my greatest teachers, you know. So the gift that I received from that whole thing, as extraordinarily difficult as it was, if I had to do it over again, I would.
Yeah. 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 So I want to circle back to the question about the seamlessness and the story that you shared in coming out of that very difficult situation and emerging as this new being who was very much in touch with who you are at your core, not the outer who you are, but these values of truth and care and compassion and love and integrity and kindness and so on. Um, so is it okay to paraphrase that as saying that that reemergence of your awareness of who you are in your core and what you value in your core as being essentially who you are is what allowed that seamlessness between the inner and the outer, the spiritual experience and the world experience, the outer world experience? Is that an accurate?
Yeah, it is. One of the ways that I describe it, sometimes when I'm teaching, is that prior to Sufism, there was always a level of anxiety that was running within me.
Mm,
And if you were to, pop open my head and listen to the thoughts, the anxiety would run along the lines of, I'm not sure I'm good enough. I'm comparing myself with him and da da da. And do I stand up, physically, mentally, in the world, all those sorts of things. And so
mhm,
I was never quite comfortable in any setting that I was in.
mm,
What Sufism and the practice and the study and Sufism is essentially about opening the heart. It's about
mhm,
discovering who we are. That's the essence of what it is. And as I became to know that more and know it in an embodied sense and
mhm,
not an intellectual sense,
mhm,
I became more comfortable with who I am with my imperfections,
mm,
with my faults, with
yeah,
all the ways that I am not, you know, who I could be or might be.
mhm,
Um, and it became possible for me to begin to love myself with all of those things and not try to love myself by removing all of those, things that I thought that were keeping me from being this or that.
mm, mm,
And so that seamlessness is for me knowing myself and knowing that I'm worthy and I'm deserving of love with all the imperfections and faults and all the shortcomings that I have, and that everyone else is exactly the same, no different than that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in being able to do that, Habib, my life is so much happier now.
mhm,
I mean, I really enjoy life. I laugh a lot.
yeah,
I have fun a lot. And when I'm in conversations, whether it's work or whether it's Sufi stuff or whether I enjoy the conversations and I have fun
yeah,
and I play appropriately, with the people that I'm talking with because to me that's what life is all about. And I really try not to take anything too seriously you know,
mm,
even if it means, I'm losing a $50,000 commission or whatever it might be, I
yeah,
try not to take things too seriously because ultimately it's about who we are and how we are with other people and how we treat each other. That's the bottom line, man. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love I have to repeat it just for myself. So the part of that transformation was getting to the point of loving yourself with your faults rather than this idea that you had to remove all of those faults in order to love yourself.
Yes.
And not only that, but realizing you are deserving and worthy of that love with all of your faults
Yeah.
included.
Yeah.
And so is everyone else.
Yeah. And
So,
so is
yeah,
everyone else. Exactly right. Yeah.
thank you for that. So, I wonder, you mentioned that you've received gifts for which you could never repay. Um, and I wondered if you'd say more about that.
Um, there's so many ways in which I've been blessed. There was a book written years ago. I'm not sure if Gurdjieff uh, wrote it or it was about him, Meetings with Remarkable Men. You read that?
Mm, mm-mm.
So I feel that my life has been kind of a journey of meetings with remarkable people. My first teacher, Dr. Arya, an extraordinary person.
Yeah,
Um, uh, Krishnamurti, I wasn't close to him personally, but again, an extraordinary person. Ramana Maharshi, I met him through his words, but uh, uh, and then Ibrahim Jaffe, Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe. But for me, Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal.
yeah,
Um, for me, he is what in Sufism we call a wali. The meaning of wali in Arabic is a friend of God,
yeah,
what the Christians call saints. And he, for me, was a true wali, a true friend of God. He taught me what it means to be a human being. And for me to have had the honor of meeting him and spending time with him
yeah,
um, was a gift that so few of us have had the opportunity to have that, and I'll be forever grateful for that. It's funny. In the position that, I have in Minnesota and, within the national community, I had the opportunity to spend time with him. And every time I would meet Sidi, I would start by introducing myself because he's somebody who's talking to thousands of people. So I would say to him, Sidi, I'm Abdullah from Minneapolis. And he'd go, I know. So like months later, I go in to see him again. I go, Sidi, I'm Abdullah from Minneapolis. He goes, I know. Then a couple months later, I did the same thing. I go in, I go, Sidi, I'm Abdullah from Minneapolis. He looks at me, he goes, I know who you are. Okay, okay, Sidi, you actually do know who I am. I never said that again because he did know who I was, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And to have had the opportunity of meeting him, not just in spirit, but in this physical plane,
yeah,
is a gift that few, it's such a rare opportunity for any human being. And I'm blessed to have had that
yeah.
opportunity myself.
Oh, you're bringing me to tears. Uh, how you used the phrase arms wide open earlier, and that is how I experienced CD.
Yeah.
I experienced CD as come whoever you are, however you are, wherever you are, just come and taste the love.
Yeah.
And would you like another taste of love? Would you like to taste more than that? And more than that, more than that. That's how I experienced CD. So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. And we're wrapping down because I'm aware of the time. I want to ask you one more question, and that is, you mentioned social justice and that this was something that was important for you. Um, I believe when you were in high school, you
Yes.
talked about, and you talked about this, you juxtaposed your spiritual quest with social justice. So I wonder now, after meeting a life of leading a life of meeting remarkable people and of exploring many different paths from mystical Christianity and Eastern Orthodox Christianity to the Catholicism you grew up in, and Zen and Tibetan Buddhism and so on and so forth. Um, if you were going to say something to that teenager who was so interested and committed to social justice, and you could bring together advice that paired spirituality and social justice, what would you say to him?
Social justice and spirituality are inextricably joined because as we come to know ourselves as human beings, which is the essence of what the spiritual journey and the spiritual investigation is, just as we said a few minutes ago, that which I have within me is within you. In fact, for the Sufis, we take it one step beyond that. And for the Sufis, we say there is only one,
Mhm.
not two, only one. And so, as human beings, as we come to understand that again, intrinsically, in an embodied sense, not in just an intellectual sense, then we know that, and all the traditions say this, all of them do, that we want for our brother and sister what we want for ourselves. Why? Not just because it's the right thing to do, because in reality, they are us. We are them. We are one. And so we're members of one body, one family, one heart. And so when we want for people freedom and peace and an end to violence and being treated with respect, um, it's because they're us in actuality,
Yeah,
not in theory, you know? And
yeah,
so social justice follows spirituality and spirituality follows social justice. And for social justice to be um, at its most effective, and just look at the example of Martin Luther King or Mohandas Gandhi, when they're married with the spiritual understanding that whatever it is that we're speaking out about is not our enemy. Those people are not in opposition to us. They are also our brothers and sisters. And so we speak out, for the goodness and the welfare of all, but not from hatred and not from resentment, but from love. And that is what has the opportunity to be a true catalyst for peace and reconciliation in this world. The two go hand in hand together.
to act from love, to speak
Absolutely.
from love, to
Absolutely.
reach out from love.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Pat, thank you for a great conversation.
You're very welcome.
Thank you to all listeners for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go briefly, if you would pause for just a moment and reflect on what stays with you from this conversation with Pat. May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light in your own heart. May you grow in compassion, clarity, and courage. May you find your way again and again back home to the divine, however you name it. If today's conversation spoke to you, please like, share, and comment on this episode. Please follow and subscribe to Beyond Names. To make an appointment with me, please visit habibboerger.com. Until next time, may you be light. May you consciously participate in growing your light, and may you share your light. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Habib.
Thank you.